The briefing room was dark and cold, just like Zethkalar liked it. The old Vorthik soldier sat at the front of the room, his green scales covered in scars from dozens of battles. His yellow eyes looked at the young soldiers sitting before him. They were eager, excited, ready to fight. They had no idea what was coming. "Today I will tell you about humans," Zethkalar said, his voice rough and tired. "You think you know about them. You think they are weak. You think they are easy to beat. I thought the same thing once." One of the young soldiers, barely past his first molting, raised his hand. "Sir, the reports say humans are soft. They have no claws, no natural armor. They cannot even see in the dark properly." Zethkalar's laugh was bitter and cold. "Yes, that is what the report said. That is what Command told us when they sent us to New Dakota. They said it would be easy. They said we would be home in 2 weeks with another world added to the hegemony." He stood up slowly, his old joints making small clicking sounds. On the wall behind him, a hologram showed the planet New Dakota. It looked peaceful from space, covered in green forests and blue oceans. Small cities dotted the surface like tiny lights. New Dakota was supposed to be a simple mission, Zethkalar continued. 1 million humans living on a farming world. They had no real military, just some local guards and a few old ships. Our intelligence said they would surrender the moment they saw our fleet in orbit. The young soldiers nodded. This made sense to them. The hegemony was strong. The hegemony always won. Why would humans be different from all the other weak races? They had conquered? I was a squad leader then, Zethkalar said, young and stupid like you. I commanded 12 warriors in the 3rd Landing Force. We were told to take the main city and wait for the humans to give up. Simple work for simple. Mines. He touched a control and the hologram changed. Now it showed the orbital bombardment. Bright flashes of light hit the planet's surface as hegemony ships fired their weapons. The bombardment was meant to scare the humans, not destroy them. Dead humans could not work in the mines. The bombardment lasted 6 hours, Zethkalar said. We hit their power plants, their communication centers, their government buildings. We left their homes alone. We wanted them afraid, not angry. Another mistake. The hologram showed drop ships falling from space like deadly rain. Thousands of hegemony soldiers heading to the surface in ships designed to inspire fear. The young soldiers in the briefing room watched with excitement. They imagined themselves in those ships, ready to win glory for the hegemony. I remember the drop, Zethkalar said, his voice becoming quieter. I remember how confident we felt. My warriors were joking about how easy this would be. They were already planning what they would do with their share of the loot. We had fought the bird people of Kethera Prime. We had crushed the machine builders of Nexus 7. Humans would be no different. The drop ships landed in fields outside the main city. The hegemony forces spread out in perfect formation, just like they had trained for years. Energy weapons charged and ready. Armor gleaming in the alien sun. Everything was going according to plan. The first thing I noticed was the silence, Zethkalar said. No screaming. No running. No begging for mercy. The humans had simply disappeared. The city looked empty, but something felt wrong. My scales were tingling, the way they do before a storm. He paused, looking at each young face in the room. They were listening now, really listening. Good. We moved into the city in standard formation. 3 columns, each with support from hover tanks. The streets were empty, but the buildings were not damaged. The humans had not run away. They were hiding somewhere, planning something. The hologram now showed the city streets. Tall buildings lined wide roads designed for human vehicles. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. But Zethkalar's soldiers had felt the wrongness in the air. That is when I first saw him, Zethkalar said, and his voice changed. There was something new in it now. Not fear exactly, but respect mixed with old terror. Captain Jake Morrison. Human male, about 40 years old in their counting. Gray hair, blue eyes, and a face like carved stone. He was standing on a rooftop 3 blocks away, just watching us. The young soldiers shifted in their seats. They did not understand why their veteran teacher sounded different when talking about one human soldier. Morrison did not run when he saw us. He did not hide. He stood there for maybe 10 seconds, looking at our formation, like he was studying us. Then he raised one hand to his head in what I later learned was a human military salute. And then he was gone. Zeth Kalar touched the control again. The hologram showed tactical displays, movement patterns, the kind of data that military minds understood. But the patterns were wrong, chaotic, nothing like the orderly formations the hegemony used. We reached the city center without seeing another human. My squad leader instincts were screaming warnings, but the company commander ordered us to secure the government building. That building had been hit in the bombardment, but it was still standing. We thought it would be empty. The old soldier's claws clicked against the podium as he gripped it tighter. We were wrong. The building was not empty. It was full of humans, but not the kind we expected. These were not helpless farmers or frightened civilians. These were soldiers. He looked directly at the youngest soldier in the front row, a Vorthik barely past his naming day. Tell me, youngling, what do you think happened when we entered that building? The young soldier straightened up proudly. Sir, you killed them all. Hegemony weapons are superior. Hegemony tactics are perfect. The humans stood no chance. Zeth Kalar's laugh was like broken glass. No, little warrior. We walked into hell, and the humans were the ones holding the door open. The room was completely quiet now. Even the air recycling system seemed to have stopped making noise. The young soldiers stared at their teacher, waiting for him to continue. The first human I met face to face was Sergeant Linda Hayes, Zeth Kalar said. Small female, maybe half my size. Brown hair tied back, green eyes that seemed to see everything. She was waiting for us in the main hallway, sitting behind a desk like she worked there. He paused, remembering. She looked up when we came in, smiled, and said something in their language. I did not understand the words then, but I learned later what she said. She said, "Welcome to New Dakota, boys. Hope you brought your lunch. Because you are going to be here a while." The hologram flickered and died. Zeth Kalar turned back to face his students, and they could see something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something that made them uncomfortable. That was the beginning, he said quietly. The beginning of 3 years of fighting that taught me what humans really are. And by the time you hear the rest of my story, you will understand why the sound of human laughter still wakes me up at night. Zeth Kalar paced slowly in front of the young soldiers. His claws clicked on the metal floor with each step. The sound was the only noise in the quiet briefing room. The old warrior's yellow eyes looked far away, seeing things that happened long ago. Sergeant Linda Hayes was still smiling when the shooting started, he said. The humans had turned that government building into a trap. Every room, every hallway, every staircase was designed to kill us slowly. One of the young soldiers raised his hand. Sir, but our weapons are better. Our armor is stronger. How could primitive humans hurt us? Zeth Kalar stopped pacing and looked at the youngling. That is what we thought too. Our energy rifles could burn through steel. Our armor could stop almost any projectile. We were bigger, stronger, faster than the humans. But none of that mattered. He touched a control on the podium. A new hologram appeared, showing the inside of the government building. The corridors looked normal, but Zeth Kalar's experienced eyes could see the problems. The humans did not fight. Use the way we expected, he continued. We expected them to stand in lines and shoot at us, like civilized warriors. Instead, they disappeared and appeared like ghosts. They used their own building against us. The hologram showed tactical markers, movement patterns that made no sense to traditional military thinking. Red dots appeared and vanished, showing where humans had attacked, and then melted away. Sergeant Hayes was gone by the time we reached her desk, but she left us a present, a small explosive device hidden in the drawer. It did not kill anyone, but it filled the hallway with smoke and noise. While we were confused, humans attacked us from 3 different directions. Zeth Kalar's voice became harder. They used projectile weapons, crude metal bullets fired by chemical explosions. We laughed at first. Our armor could stop those easily. But the humans were not aiming at our armor. The young soldiers leaned forward, trying to understand. Armor was meant to protect. If the humans could not penetrate it, how could they win? They aimed at our joints, Zeth Kalar explained, at the gaps between armor plates, at our weapons, at our communication equipment. Every shot was perfect, precise, calculated. These humans had studied us, learned our weaknesses, planned for this moment. He walked to the wall display and pointed at specific areas. A human called Danny Mitchell was responsible for psychological warfare. Just a young male, maybe 20 years old. He would leave recordings playing in empty rooms. Human music, strange and haunting sounds that got into our heads. The old soldier's scales rippled with remembered discomfort. Vorthic warriors do not like unexpected sounds. We rely on our hearing to detect threats. But these human songs filled our minds with noise, made us jumpy and afraid. Mitchell would place speakers in air vents, in ceiling panels, in places we could not reach easily. While we were distracted by the music, other humans would attack. They moved through their own building like they had built it themselves. Secret passages, hidden doors, maintenance tunnels. Every time we cleared a room, humans would appear behind us from somewhere we had already checked. The hologram showed the building's layout with red lines indicating hidden passages and maintenance areas. The human knowledge of their own structures was far beyond what the hegemony had expected. Then I met Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez, Zeth Kalar said, and his voice carried the same respect it had when he mentioned Captain Morrison. She was the human commander for this sector. Small female, dark hair, eyes like black stones. She did not look dangerous, but she was the most dangerous human I had ever seen. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Rodriguez understood something we did not. She knew that our superior technology was also our weakness. We depended on our energy, weapons, our hover vehicles, our advanced equipment. She made sure we could not use any of it properly. The display changed to show the city's power grid. Large sections were blacked out, creating a pattern that looked almost artistic. The humans had shut down power to most of the city before we arrived. Our energy weapons needed time to recharge between shots, but we had always plugged them into local power sources during long battles. Now we had to rely on our battery packs, which meant fewer shots and more careful aiming. Zeth Kalar's laugh was bitter. Rodriguez had thought of that too. The humans filled the air with small metal particles, dust and debris that interfered with our targeting systems. Our advanced scopes became useless. We had to aim by eye, just like primitive warriors. But the worst part was the medics, he continued, and now his voice became quiet. Dr. Susan Park was their chief medical officer, a small human female with gentle hands and fierce eyes. She would run into active combat zones to save wounded humans, completely ignoring enemy fire. The young soldiers looked confused. This behavior made no sense to them. In Vorthic society, wounded warriors were left to live or die on their own. Medical attention was for those who could still fight. Dr. Park would crawl through gunfire to reach a wounded human soldier. She would treat their injuries while bullets flew overhead and help carry them to safety. Other humans would risk their lives to help her, creating a chain of warriors who cared more about saving their comrades than killing enemies. Zeth-Kalar saw the confusion on the young faces and tried to explain. This behavior was completely alien to us. We could not understand why healthy warriors would endanger themselves for wounded ones. But it gave the humans something we did not have. It gave them hope. A wounded human who saw Dr. Park coming would fight harder, knowing help was on the way. Healthy humans would take greater risks, knowing their comrades would save them if things went wrong. They fought like they were connected by invisible threads, each one supporting all the others. The hologram now showed a night scene, with small lights moving through dark streets. The lights moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully coordinated. The worst night was when Major Chris Thompson led his assault, Zeth-Kalar said. We had been in the city for 5 days. We thought we were winning. We controlled most of the important buildings and had pushed the humans back to the outer districts. He gestured at the moving lights. Thompson had other plans. While we were celebrating our victories, he was gathering every human in the city who could hold a weapon. Not just soldiers, but farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, even children old enough to carry supplies. They attacked us at midnight from every direction at once. No formation, no military precision, just hundreds of humans with simple weapons and absolute determination. They used farm tools, kitchen knives, improvised explosives made from fertilizer and fuel. Zeth-Kalar's voice became darker. We had better weapons, better armor, better training. But we were scattered throughout the city in small groups, and the humans knew every street, every building, every hiding place. They hit us like a flood, overwhelming our positions through sheer numbers and desperate courage. Major Thompson was everywhere that night. One moment he would be leading an attack on our command post. The next he would be 3 blocks away, rescuing trapped civilians. He seemed to appear wherever the fighting was hardest, wherever his people needed hope the most. The old soldier stopped pacing and faced his students directly. By dawn, we had lost half our forces. Not killed, but scattered, confused, demoralized. The humans had turned their weakness into strength, their desperation into power. And we finally understood that this was not going to be the easy victory command had promised us. That was the night I learned that humans do not fight like other species. They do not fight for conquest or glory or even survival. They fight for each other, and that makes them the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. The briefing room grew colder as Zeth-Kalar continued his story. The young soldiers had stopped fidgeting. They sat perfectly still, listening to every word their old teacher spoke. Something in his voice told them that the worst parts were still coming. After the night assault, Command decided we needed a new strategy, Zeth-Kalar said. They sent reinforcements. An entire division, 20,000 warriors with heavy weapons and armor support. The plan was simple. Surround the humans, cut off their supplies, and wait for them to surrender. He activated the hologram again. This time it showed a small military base built into a hillside. The structure looked tough, but not impossible to take. Concrete walls, guard towers, and a few heavy weapons. It looked like any other military installation. Firebase Echo, Zeth-Kalar said, and his voice became quieter. 300 humans defending a supply depot. Command thought it would fall. In 3 days, they were wrong. One of the young soldiers raised his hand. Sir, 20,000 against 300? Those are good odds for us. Zeth-Kalar's yellow eyes fixed on the speaker. Yes, that is what we thought. Good odds, easy victory. We had learned nothing from the city fighting. We still believed that. Numbers and superior weapons would win the day. The hologram zoomed in on the firebase, showing its layout in detail. The base was built like a star, with defensive positions pointing in all directions. It sat on top of a hill, giving the defenders a clear view of any approaching enemy. The human commander was Colonel Maria Santos, Seth Kalar continued, middle-aged female with gray streaks in her black hair. She had been a teacher before the war, but now she was the leader of these 300 defenders. And she was about to teach us lessons we would never forget. He paused, remembering. Santos did something no Vortha commander would ever do. She knew every single human under her command by name. She knew their families, their homes, their dreams. She treated them not as weapons to be used, but as people to be protected. The young soldiers looked confused. This was not how military command worked in their society. Leaders commanded from safety, while warriors fought and died. Personal connections made commanders weak and emotional. Every morning, Santos would walk around the entire base, Seth Kalar explained. She would stop at every position, talk to every defender. She would ask about their health, their families, their fears. She would bring them food, water, ammunition. She would listen to their problems and try to solve them. The hologram showed the siege beginning. Hegemony forces surrounded the hill. In perfect formations, their weapons pointed at the small human base. From above, it looked like a giant closing its fist around a tiny insect. We started with artillery bombardment, Seth Kalar said. 3 days of constant fire from our heavy guns. We expected the humans to break, to run, to surrender. Instead, they went underground. The display changed to show tunnel systems beneath. The base, a complex network of passages, storage rooms, and defensive positions that had been carved directly into the rock. Staff Sergeant Pete Johnson was their engineer, Seth Kalar continued. A big human male with strong hands and a creative mind. While we were shooting at empty buildings above ground, he was turning the entire hill into a fortress. Johnson had connected every building to the tunnel system. The humans could move from one end of the base to the other without ever showing themselves. When we hit their communications tower, he rerouted their radio through buried cables. When we destroyed their power plant, he activated backup generators hidden in the tunnels. Seth Kalar's claws clicked against the podium as he gripped it tighter. But Johnson did more than just build defenses. He turned every piece of equipment into a weapon. Mining explosives became bombs. Construction vehicles became mobile gun platforms. Even their food preparation equipment was modified to create chemical weapons from common supplies. The hologram showed the first assault. Hegemony troops advancing up the hill in organized waves, their energy weapons firing continuously. The human response looked chaotic, unorganized, but it was devastatingly effective. The humans did not fight fair, Seth Kalar said. They used their knowledge of the terrain against us. Hidden traps, surprise attacks, weapons that appeared from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Every step up that hill cost us warriors. Private Lisa Chun was their sniper, he continued, and his voice carried reluctant admiration. Small, human female, maybe 25 years old. She could hit targets at distances that should have been impossible with their primitive weapons. But accuracy was not her most dangerous skill. The young soldiers leaned forward, eager to hear about combat prowess they could understand. Marksmanship was something that made sense to warrior minds. Chun would wound enemy warriors instead of killing them, Seth Kalar explained. A shot to the leg, the arm, the shoulder. Painful but not fatal. This forced other warriors to stop fighting and help their wounded comrades. One accurate shot would take 3 or 4 enemies out of the battle, but the truly terrifying part came when we tried to rescue our wounded. Chun would let medics reach the injured warriors, let them start treatment, and then wound the medics too. Soon we had 6 or 7 warriors trapped in one location, unable to move, calling for help. The old soldier's scales rippled with remembered fear. When we sent more help, Chun would repeat the process. Before we knew it, entire squads were pinned down by one human with one rifle. And while we were focused on rescue operations, other humans would attack our main force. The hologram showed casualty reports, medical evacuations, the growing strain on hegemony resources. What should have been a simple siege was becoming a nightmare of logistics and morale problems. After 2 weeks, we were desperate, Zethkalar admitted. Our warriors were exhausted, frightened, angry. Many had stopped volunteering for assault duty. Command ordered a final attack using our best troops and heaviest weapons. The display showed the massive assault formation. Tanks, aircraft, elite, soldiers, everything the hegemony could bring to bear on one small human base. It looked unstoppable. Captain Roy Adams led the final defense of the main gate, Zethkalar said, and his voice became very quiet. Young human male, maybe 30 years old. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and a smile that never seemed to disappear, even in the worst fighting. Adams had been wounded 3 times during the siege. His left arm was in a sling. He walked with a limp, and bandages covered half his face. Any sensible warrior would have retreated to the medical station. Instead, Adams took position at the main gate with a damaged rifle and a handful of ammunition. The young soldiers were completely silent now. They could hear something in their teacher's voice that they had never heard before. Not just respect for an enemy, but something approaching awe. When our final assault reached the gate, Adams was alone, Zethkalar continued. His squad had been killed or wounded. His weapons were almost out of ammunition. His position was surrounded by superior forces with superior firepower. By every military calculation, he should have surrendered or died. Instead, he smiled at. You actually smiled. Then he started fighting. Zethkalar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Adams held that gate for 47 minutes against an entire battalion. 47 minutes of impossible courage, perfect aim, and absolute refusal to give up. He turned that gate into a killing ground using nothing but determination and skill. When our reinforcements finally arrived at Firebase Echo, they found Adams still at his post. Still alive, still fighting, still smiling. And behind him, 230 humans were still ready to continue the battle. The hologram flickered and died. Zethkalar looked at his students, seeing the confusion and fear in their young eyes. That was when I understood, he said softly. Humans do not fight for victory. They fight for each other. And as long as one human still breathes, none of them will ever truly be defeated. The briefing room felt like a tomb. Zethkalar stood in the dim light, looking at the young soldiers who had come to hear about easy victories and glorious conquests. Instead, they had learned about defeat, fear, and an enemy that fought with weapons the hegemony could not understand. The siege of Firebase Echo lasted 3 weeks, Zethkalar said. When it was over, we had lost 12,000 warriors. The humans had lost 70. But those numbers do not tell the real story. The real story is what happened next. He walked slowly to the center of the room, his old wounds making him move carefully. The scars on his scales caught the light, each one a memory of human weapons and human determination. Command finally realized what we were facing, he continued. These were not like other species we had conquered. The bird people surrendered when their leaders died. The machine builders gave up when their factories were destroyed. But humans ... Humans became more dangerous when you hurt them. One of the young soldiers, the one who had asked so many questions earlier, raised his hand again. But this time, his voice was smaller, less confident. Sir, what did Command decide to do? Zeth Kalar's laugh was hollow and tired. They decided to retreat. After 3 years of fighting, after losing a quarter of our invasion force, after facing an enemy that should have been defeated in weeks, the mighty hegemony decided to run away. The hologram flickered back to life, showing orbital positions around New Dakota. Hegemony ships were pulling back, leaving the planet's atmosphere, abandoning the surface they had fought so hard to take. But even retreat was a lesson in human warfare, Seth Kalar said. General Patricia Wells commanded the planet's defense. She had been a university administrator before the war, responsible for managing students and teachers. Now she was managing the defense of an entire world. The display showed communication networks, supply lines, coordination between military and civilian populations that should have been impossible to maintain under constant attack. Wells understood something we did not, Seth Kalar explained. She knew that every human on the planet was a warrior, whether they carried weapons or not. The farmers who grew food for soldiers, the mechanics who repaired vehicles, the doctors who healed the wounded, the teachers who kept children safe. All of them were part of the war effort. He gestured at the hologram, which now showed the complex web of cooperation that had sustained human resistance for 3 years. When we attacked military bases, civilians would take over the fighting. When we targeted civilian areas, soldiers would appear to defend them. We could never find the real command structure because every human was both commander and soldier. Commander Bob Fraser led their space forces. Seth Kalar continued. The humans had old ships, outdated weapons, technology that should have been useless against our fleet. But Fraser turned those weaknesses into advantages. The display changed to show space battles around New Dakota's moons. Human ships moved in patterns that defied military logic, using tactics that seemed suicidal that somehow worked. Fraser's ships would ram our vessels, Seth Kalar said, and his voice carried disbelief even after all these years. Deliberate collisions, sacrificing their own ships to damage ours. His pilots would fly damaged fighters directly into our gun positions. They turned their entire fleet into guided missiles. The young soldiers looked horrified. This was not warfare as they understood it. Warriors were supposed to survive, to live to fight another day. Suicide attacks were the tactics of the desperate and insane. But the most terrifying part was how organized their suicide missions were, Seth Kalar explained. Fraser's people did not throw their lives away randomly. Every sacrifice was planned, calculated, designed to achieve maximum damage to our forces. They died with purpose, and that purpose was protecting their fellow humans. The hologram showed the final evacuation. Hegemony ships loading survivors, preparing to leave orbit, abandoning their conquest. It should have been a moment of shame. But Seth Kalar's voice carried something else entirely. Lieutenant Kevin Brown and Sergeant Grace Miller commanded the final human offensive, he said. They could have slaughtered us as we retreated. We were broken, demoralized, scattered. Our warriors were thinking only of escape. The humans could have destroyed us completely. He paused, looking directly at each young face in the room. Instead, they showed us something we had never seen before. They showed us mercy. The word hung in the air like a foreign concept. Mercy was not something the hegemony understood. Enemies were destroyed or enslaved. There was no middle ground, no third option. Brown and Miller organized covering fire for our evacuation, Seth Kalar explained. They protected our retreat, made sure our wounded reached the ships, even helped carry some of our more seriously injured warriors to safety. They fought us for 3 years, and then they helped us leave. When I asked Brown why they were helping, he said something I will never forget. He said, because the war is over, and you are no longer our enemies. You are just soldiers trying to go home. Seth Kalar walked back to the podium, his movements slow and deliberate. The story was almost over, but the hardest part was still coming. I spent my last day on New Dakota in a human medical station, he said. Dr. Susan Park, the medic who had run through gunfire to save human soldiers, was now treating hegemony wounded. She worked on my injuries with the same care she had shown her own people. While she treated my wounds, Dr. Park talked to me about her family. Her husband was a teacher. Her children were in school somewhere safe. She showed me pictures, shared stories, treated me like a person instead of an enemy. I realized that humans do not hate their opponents. They simply fight to protect what they love. The room was completely silent. Even the air recycling system seemed to have stopped. The young soldiers stared at their teacher, trying to understand. Lessons that challenged everything they believed about warfare and strength. When our ships left orbit, I stood at the observation deck and looked down at New Dakota one last time, Zeth Kalar said. The planet looked peaceful again. Green forests, blue oceans, small cities rebuilding what we had destroyed. It looked like it had when we first arrived, full of promise and hope. But I knew the truth now. That beautiful, peaceful world was home to the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Not because they were strong or cruel or violent, but because they cared about each other more than they cared about their own lives. He turned off the hologram and faced his students directly. 3 years after we left New Dakota, hegemony. Intelligence reported that the humans had rebuilt everything we destroyed. Their cities were larger, their defenses stronger, their population growing. We had tried to conquer them, and instead we had made them more powerful. Command classified the entire campaign, Zeth Kalar continued. Officially, it never happened. The reports were sealed, the survivors were transferred to distant postings, and New Dakota was marked as a restricted system. But those of us who were there remember. We remember Captain Jake Morrison and his impossible tactics. We remember Sergeant Linda Hayes and her deadly traps. We remember Major Chris Thompson and his night of screaming stars. We remember Colonel Maria Santos and her 300 defenders who held off 20,000 of our best warriors. Zeth Kalar's voice became very quiet. Most of all, we remember that humans fight not for conquest or glory, but for love. And there is no weapon in the galaxy more dangerous than a warrior who fights for love. He looked at each young face one final time. If the hegemony ever decides to face humanity again, pray that you are assigned to a different front. Because once you have seen humans fight, once you understand what they are capable of when they protect what they cherish, you will spend the rest of your life knowing that somewhere in the galaxy there are warriors who can defeat any enemy simply by refusing to abandon each other. The old soldier walked toward the door, leaving his students alone with their thoughts and fears. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. Sleep well tonight, younglings, and hope that the humans are sleeping peacefully too. Because if they ever wake up angry, if they ever decide that the hegemony is a threat to what they love, then all our ships and weapons and warriors will not be enough to save us. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the young soldiers in darkness, alone with the terrible knowledge of what humanity could do when pushed too far.